In May of 2021, gas stations along the east coast of the United States suddenly ran dry. There was no oil embargo, no natural disaster, no terrorist bombing. The shutdown was caused by a criminal gang, likely operating out of Russia, that used ransomware to paralyze the Colonial Pipeline, a critical piece of American infrastructure. A handful of anonymous hackers working from halfway around the world managed to disrupt the lives of millions of Americans and create a national security crisis. They didn't need tanks or missiles, just malicious code. What happens when our most vital systems, pipelines, power grids, hospitals, even elections, are just one click away from collapse?
Cyber attack has shut down a Texas school district for the next few days. Over the weekend, Uvalde CISD detected ransomware in servers. The attack is affecting everything from security systems to phone lines to air conditioning, so kids could not go to school today.
JLR has suspended production worldwide in India, China, Brazil and Slovakia. The cyber attack has forced the company to shut down all of its IT systems. JLR says it's working on a controlled restart of its computer system, but for now, the company's struggling to register new vehicles with the DVLA, to order parts and to book shipments for export. A source familiar with the situation at Jaguar Land Rover has told ITV News this is catastrophic. It's a complete shutdown.
A cyber network outage has now forced the closure of the entire South Lyon Community School District this week. The first notice went out to students and families on Sunday night, letting the community know all schools across the district would be closed on Monday. That closure has since extended into today. CBS News Detroit confirmed with the district it's because of a cybersecurity incident currently being investigated.
Another human has been officially unalived by malware after a cyber gang attacked a meat repair facility.
This is the world of cyber conflict, where invisible attacks can cripple societies and turn everyday technologies into a new kind of battlefield.
Cyber conflict refers to hostile actions carried out through computer networks, hacking, sabotage, theft, or disinformation that can disrupt societies without a single shot being fired. It's best understood as a form of asymmetric warfare, strategies weaker actors use to exploit vulnerabilities rather than confront stronger opponents directly. Guerrilla tactics and terrorism are older examples. Cyber attacks are their digital counterpart. Cyber operations are especially effective as asymmetric tools for three reasons. First, they have a low barrier to entry. Launching an attack requires laptops and expertise, not tanks or fighter jets. Second, attribution is difficult. Identifying who is behind an attack can take weeks or months, giving both states and non-state actors plausible deniability. The 2014 Sony picture hack, for example, was widely attributed to North Korea, but only after weeks of investigation and debate. Third, the attacker has the advantage. A defender must secure every potential weakness, while an attacker only needs to find one. These features make cyber attacks both cheap and powerful. A small group of hackers can paralyze infrastructure, steal sensitive data, or spread disinformation on a scale once reserved for great powers. They also blur the boundary between war and peace, since election interference or propaganda campaigns may not look like armed attacks, but can destabilize governments and erode trust in institutions. That ambiguity is precisely what makes cyber attacks so dangerous and so central to international security today. Cyber operations take many forms, from espionage to sabotage. To understand how they work, it's best to look at who the main players are and what tactics they use. The digital battlefield is a crowded and murky space with a diverse cast of state, non-state, and hybrid actors. States remain the most capable and well-resourced cyber powers. Countries like the United States, China, Russia, and Israel have sophisticated military and intelligence units dedicated to cyber operations. They use three primary tactics: espionage, stealing of sensitive information like government secrets or corporate intellectual property. In 2015, for example, Chinese state-sponsored hackers gained access to the Office of Personnel Management, the U.S. government agency responsible for maintaining personnel records of federal employees. They used that access to steal sensitive personal data for over 21 million federal employees, likely giving them insights into the identity of U.S. intelligence operatives worldwide. Sabotage, the damaging or disrupting of critical systems. The Stuxnet worm, widely believed to be a U.S.-Israeli project, physically destroyed Iranian nuclear centrifuges by causing them to spin out of control. This remains the clearest example of cyber sabotage. And disinformation, using fake accounts or troll farms to amplify false stories, sow divisions, and erode trust in democratic institutions. During the 2016 US election, for example, Russia's Internet Research Agency used thousands of fake social media accounts and troll farms to spread divisive content and influence public opinion. Increasingly, states integrate these cyber attacks into hybrid warfare, combining them with traditional military operations, as Russia did in its invasion of Ukraine, by launching missile strikes and cyber attacks on the power grid simultaneously. Most analysts now expect future conflicts to have a cyber dimension woven into military operations from the very beginning. Beyond states, two main types of non-state actors operate in cyberspace, those motivated by profit and those motivated by politics. Cybercriminals are motivated by profit. Their main weapon is ransomware, which they use to paralyze critical infrastructure like hospitals or pipelines, as the world saw with the Colonial Pipeline shutdown, and to extort massive payments. Hacktivists, by contract, use cyber attacks as a form of political protest. Anonymous is a good example here. They hack websites, leak documents, and launch denial-of-service attacks to promote a political cause and to draw global attention. But the line between the two often gets blurred, and this is where the battlefield gets truly murky. Hybrid actors are groups that operate between the boundary of state and non-state. Some governments, particularly Russia, sponsor or tolerate patriotic hackers like Fancy Bear or APT28 to attack adversaries while maintaining plausible deniability. This group, which has ties to Russian military intelligence, is believed to have been responsible for hacking into the Democratic National Committee's servers in 2016, leaking sensitive emails. Similarly, North Korea's state-backed hacking units effectively function as a criminal enterprise, stealing money through cybercrime to fund the regime. The prime example of this is the Lazarus Group, the North Korean group behind the 2022 theft of over $620 million in cryptocurrency from the online game Axie Infinity, using those funds to support the regime. This mix of official support and deniable activity make it incredibly difficult to know who is truly responsible for an attack, and for these actors, that uncertainty is a feature, not a bug. The capability of these actors is truly impressive. In 2010, a US-Israeli cyber attack using the Stuxnet virus destroyed hundreds of centrifuges used to enrich uranium at Iran's Natanz nuclear enrichment facility. In 2014, North Korean-sponsored cybercriminals stole nearly $100 million from the Central Bank of Bangladesh, often referred to as the Lazarus heist, which I explore in another video. That same year, North Korean hackers also broke into the internal servers of Sony Picture Studios, releasing confidential data, including personal employment and health information about Sony employees, internal emails, copies of then unreleased Sony films, and other information, all intended to embarrass Sony. The attack was launched in retaliation for Sony's production of the film The Interview, which depicted a fictional assassination attempt of the country's leader, Kim Jong-un. In 2016, Russian government-affiliated groups called Fancy Bear and Cozy Bear launched cyber attacks against Democratic National Committee servers, attempting to collect information which could be used to influence the outcome of the presidential election that year. In 2017, a Russian military hacker group called Sandstorm launched a series of powerful cyber attacks using the NotPetya malware against banks, electricity firms, and government ministries. Disguised as a ransomware attack, the operation effectively crippled the Ukrainian government, wiping computers across the country, shutting down the country's key infrastructure, and costing the country billions of dollars in economic damages. That same year, hackers believed to be affiliated with the North Korean Lazarus Group launched the WannaCry attack. Initially targeting the British National Health Service, but quickly spreading worldwide, the attack employed the Eternal Blue exploit, developed by the National Security Agency in the United States, but stolen and released by Russian-affiliated hacking groups in order to encrypt computer data. The attack effectively shut down the National Health Service in the United Kingdom for almost a week, illustrating the potential impact of such attacks for hostile actors. The virus ultimately affected more than 200,000 computers in 150 countries around the world, with an economic impact estimated in the billions. During the 2018 World Cup, Hamas launched a cyber operation dubbed Pongol. Essentially, Hamas created an Android app called Golden Cup, which was promoted on social media, primarily to members of the Israeli Defense Forces, as the fastest app for live scores and fixtures for the World Cup. Once downloaded, the app surreptitiously infected the targeted phone with spyware, discreetly monitoring the target, stealing information, and tracking the user's location, accessing cameras and microphones, downloading images and data. And in response, Israel launched the first kinetic response to a cyber attack, launching an airstrike against the building believed to host the Hamas operation. In 2020, Russian government hackers launched the SolarWinds attack, which gave them covert backdoor access to more than 18,000 computer networks belonging to a variety of Fortune 500 companies and U.S. government agencies. In 2021, a series of attacks on Microsoft Exchange servers attributed to state-sponsored actors operating out of China, known as Hafnium, allowed access to email accounts and installation of additional malware for long-term access to a variety of companies and U.S. government servers, through which it's believed China was able to collect information permitting them to identify a number of U.S. operatives and spies around the world. And in that same year, the Colonial Pipeline hack we explored earlier took place. A ransomware attack by a group known as DarkSide forced the shutdown of the company's operations, causing fuel shortages across the eastern half of the United States, impacting global oil markets and ultimately forcing Colonial Pipeline to pay a $4.5 million ransom to restore operations. And these are just a handful of examples. We could go on and on. The point is this: the rising cost of cyber conflict is rewriting some of the most basic rules of international security. Traditional ideas about sovereignty, deterrence, and even the definition of war are being challenged. Much of this happens in the gray zone, a space of conflict that exists below the threshold of traditional armed attack, but is still strategically disruptive. Sovereignty is harder to defend. Cyber attacks routinely cross borders without soldiers or missiles. A government can wake up to find its power grid shut down or its elections disrupted by actors operating on the other side of the globe. Traditional ideas of territorial defense don't map neatly into cyberspace. Deterrence is less reliable. In a nuclear or conventional war, knowing who the attacker is allows for retaliation. In cyberspace, attribution is murky. Hackers can disguise their origins or act as proxies for states. This uncertainty makes it difficult to deter future attacks, since punishment risks hitting the wrong target. Asymmetry favors the attacker. Defenders must protect every network, every device, every line of code. Attackers need to find just one weakness. This imbalance tilts power towards smaller actors who can impose a high cost on a much larger state. The boundaries between war and peace are blurred. As we saw earlier, many of these operations fall into the gray zone, below the threshold of war, but still strategically disruptive. Gray zone operations and disinformation campaigns may not count as armed attacks, but they can steadily undermine institutions, weaken economies, and erode trust in democracy. In this way, conflict is ongoing even when states are not formally at war. Global governance struggles to keep up. International law offers few clear rules for cyberspace, and efforts to establish norms move slowly. For example, it remains unclear whether, under international law, a cyber attack that shuts down a power grid counts as an armed attack that justifies self-defense. And without agreed standards, states, criminals, and activists continue to push the limits of what's acceptable. The implication is clear. Cyber conflict doesn't replace traditional warfare, but it does add a new and permanent layer of insecurity to international relations. States remain powerful, but they no longer control the battlefield as they once did.
Cyber conflict shows how warfare itself is changing. A handful of hackers with laptops can disrupt economies, paralyze infrastructure, and spread disinformation on a global scale. These operations are asymmetric, cheap for the attacker, expensive for the defender, and they blur the line between war and peace. For international relations, the lesson is clear. The digital realm is now a permanent battlefield. Sovereignty is harder to defend, deterrence less reliable, and power more evenly distributed across states, criminals, and activists. The state remains powerful, but it no longer monopolizes violence or control. Cyber conflict highlights the broad reality of today's global politics. Authority is contested, networks can be as powerful as nations, and insecurity is woven into the very systems we depend upon.